Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, do we have anybody from the public on, Ravi? Nobody from the public?
No, nobody from the public.
Okay. We just got Mayor Law joining us. So we'll move on to approve previous meeting minutes. I do not believe we have enough people to approve the April 25th or June 13th meeting minutes based on who attended. But we do not for the 18th either because I don't think Sarah was here. But if John or Brendan shows up, we should be able to approve those meeting minutes. Do you suggest we just keep moving and come back to them if we get attendance? Oh, there's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hi, Abby.
I'm just double checking the meeting minutes to see if we have enough people present to be able to approve any of them. Is that Ruth that came on too? Hi, Ruth. And I do not believe we have, anybody, we don't have any 3 people from any of the 3 meetings, Ravi. So do you suggest we just move on?
Yeah.
Unless somebody wants to vote on meeting minutes that they did not attend.
Probably not a good idea this time.
Okay. Let's move on to item 5, which is discussion unified land use and development regulations, replacement units section 5.16. So Ravi, if you want to walk us through that document.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Let me share that document. And there we go. So, since you last saw this document, or this version on the Joint Housing Committee Planning Commission meeting at the end of June, I've looked through it. I've talked to Jasmine about it, looked at the minutes. I'm trying to figure out what the both commissions' intent was with this section and made a good amount of changes to it. I couldn't do a markup with Eric's revisions and my revisions because it ended up being really messy. So I just brought it to you as a blank slate. In this version, I've proposed requiring that the removal of any units in the city be replaced in hand. In the previous version, that floor was set at 5 units. So when 5 units were slated to be removed, 5 units had to be replaced in kind. With this too, I think based off of the intents of the commissions, it seems like retaining bedroom counts were the most important aspect. So one thing that I wanted to highlight here was to make sure that whatever units were being removed, the same number of bedrooms were being provided for that. I think other than that, there were certain changes that were made during that joint committee meeting. Those changes have also been reflected in this to simplify that the removal is supposed to be applicable for any redevelopment projects that would result in the removal of any units. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you for any questions.
I missed the majority of this conversation between the Housing Commission and Planning Commission, honestly, and then the subsequent Planning Commission, so I trust the judgment of Abby and Sarah here.
Yeah, just for a little background is we have, what this is trying to get at is like the loss of units and the loss of bedrooms in the city.
Right.
So this is what we will also, I believe, just be discussing when we meet with the Housing Commission at the next joint meeting as well. So
Yeah,
this is
when
like,
is that, September?
Yeah, I believe it's the third week in September.
September
25th or
24th.
something? 24th, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm fine with that. My main concern was like if somebody was redoing an like their housing, like their house, like it's a 3-bedroom house, and they were expanding like their 2 bedrooms for their kids for a mother-in-law apartment or whatever. But I assume that they can apply for a variance or some type of like
Yeah,
waiver,
those,
right?
those types of projects wouldn't be subject to this.
Yeah, that's what I figured also. So
this is mainly for
yeah. So I have no. Yeah, this is fine.
for the removal of any units. Like the typical project would be a conversion from residential to non-residential, but ideally this could be applied for if there's if there's a redevelopment from like one unit to 10 units, and if that one unit, if that single family dwelling was a 3-bedroom house, then a 3-bedroom unit would be provided in the new development.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine with me. That's the only comment I received was like, oh well, I'm converting my 3-bedroom into a 2-bedroom, and which, but I'm fine.
Okay.
Oh, hi,
Hey,
Brendan.
Brendan.
Hey.
It's okay. Thanks for joining us. Sarah and Ruth and Joe, any questions, comments, concerns?
Mayor Lot had her hand up.
Okay. If you can, can we expand so we can see more of?
Can you stop sharing for a hot sec?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, or do that. That's fine.
Hey everyone. I just got a new computer from work and my camera doesn't function yet, so sorry about that. I just wanted to put out a scenario. Like, I know there's some properties in the downtown that have been considered for conversion to a hotel. And I wonder if there is a future where we would see value in having residential properties that are redeveloped to support a commercial use that would support the city. And in that case, if we would want like payment into the housing trust fund in lieu of compliance with specific replacement.
Is there a way to fix the volume?
Yeah, Mayor, what you're proposing would that be only for the downtown core?
It would probably make sense for gateways in downtown. I don't think it would necessarily make sense in the residential district, but.
Okay, yeah, you're a little better on audio now. Could you just repeat that, like the idea, please?
Yeah, the idea is if there was a proposed redevelopment of a property that currently has residential housing to a commercial use that would benefit the city, we could offer payment in lieu of this into our housing trust fund to support other affordable housing efforts.
I mean, I'm fine with that. It's not going to be I assume it's not going to be like a cavalcade of like 100 units proposing that, so.
I mean, if it's going to commercial, doesn't that sort of put it in a different league altogether? I mean, how could you require somebody to replace the housing? They were going to change the use of the building. Kind of to your point, Mayor. I mean,
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's specifically some residential units in the downtown core right now that were previously proposed to be replaced with a hotel. And at that time, when that was being proposed, we were specifically seeking a hotel in the downtown. So I'm just thinking about having some flexibility. You know, we have zoning to support neighborhood scale commercial use. In the gateways, we're trying to do commercial and residential. And then also like some funding stream into the housing trust fund.
Revi, it sounded like you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I think another question for you, something that I've seen in other regulations is that the replacement units ordinance only applies to certain districts, with the idea that this would be, the intent of this is to retain residential districts, right? And to keep the non-residential areas, the commercial areas, as commercial areas, with the idea that those places are going to become more commercial or more mixed use, or be mixed use. So that's a question for you, is whether you want this to be applied throughout the entire city or only in residential areas or in certain parts of the city, residential and certain non-residential areas.
Yeah, we're really using inclusionary zoning in a less traditional way in what we're trying to accomplish in Winooski, because typically it would be used to stop conversion from residential to commercial. But here we're really trying to retain housing. So I think that having it across the city makes sense, and having a lieu in payment helps us meet our goals of getting people into housing, like through the Housing Trust Fund. So I feel like that's a lever that still helps us like make headway to our housing goals rather than just excluding the area. I don't know what that number is. I know the Housing Commission, I think, has spent more time looking at what a pay in, like, what is it called? Payment in lieu, yeah, would look like. But at least that would then get money into that Housing Trust Fund, which would help people with the down payment and get access to housing, that kind of thing.
I'm also fine with that. Like, I agree with Abby. My only question would be, do we know like what that payment would be?
Right.
Because as I understand it, the Housing Trust Fund is pretty,
Underfunded.
I was gonna say sallow, but yes, that's it's a better word for it, underfunded. So the more money we can get in there, the better. I just don't know at what level this incentive really does work.
And is it based on like the size of the project? Is
Ooh,
it
good
based on the
question.
number of units that's taken down? And I think restricting the pay in lieu to the gateways and commercial areas makes sense to me too, so that everybody's not just
Yeah,
paying.
I'm down with that.
Right, paying to get out of
Right.
our housing, you know, trying to retain housing in the city. But what that number looks like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what best practices or better practices are. Do you have a sense
Yeah,
for our scale?
I've only
Okay.
seen payment in lieu numbers for affordable housing units when applied for inclusionary zoning. So the payment in lieu kicks in when a developer chooses to pay in instead of developing this affordable housing unit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head. I'll have to get back
yeah,
to you in 2
that's not
minutes to get it for you, but.
So we're pioneering here,
Yeah.
that's what you're saying.
Well, but so it's in that case, is it like if otherwise you would be building X number of affordable units, you basically have to pay an amount, like each unit that you're losing is worth a certain amount,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's a
So-
flat rate per unit of affordable housing.
So you could do the same thing, right? Or something similar, like if you have a 4-unit building downtown, we're gonna turn it into like, I don't know, a 20-room boutique hotel. I don't know. So you're losing 4 units, maybe that there's an amount for each unit, maybe, I mean, you could have a different formula. You could kind of make the penalty go up as you lose more units, you know, I don't know.
Oh, we can be fun here. Do you know what like the industry standard is for, or what do we have now for, I just don't have it in front of me.
For the payment,
Yeah.
hold on 2 seconds. I know exactly which building it's in.
And I don't, yeah, but like those are my same questions. Like, is it based off of like rent amount? Is it based off of like square footage not being used? Like,
I feel like it would be units, you know,
Units,
because
yeah.
I feel that that's how we're sort of, or you could do it, I guess, in this case.
and I'm sorry if we've already done this conversation.
Yeah, in this case, you could, if you wanted, you could look at, okay, we're losing this 2 2-bedroom units and 2 1-bedroom units, so the 2-bedroom units cost more, if you will. I mean, you could do that.
yeah, it would have to be at a number high enough so people wouldn't just always be paying out.
Right. Yeah. It's, yeah. I think it'd have to be pretty high, right?
How do we get to that number and what is high and what's that number? I mean, that's a,
Yeah, that's
it's like,
the crux of my, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
and I'll always abide by the industry standard. I just don't know what it is.
That,
If we change the benchmark.
is,
Can I ask a question here?
Go ahead, Joe.
If I, just to make sense of how this is written and how we're looking to interpret it. So if I'm reading correctly on, was it D1? So it would specify that the number of bedrooms would all have to be contained in one unit. So effectively you were having the same kind of format of housing that was lost. So like if you had torn out a 3-bedroom house, there would be a 3-bedroom unit incorporated into the replacement housing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're, okay.
Yep.
Does it make any sense to have a cap on that? I'm thinking an instance of, and maybe this is a rare instance, but say you have like a 5-bedroom house that would be lost, and is it really fair to be imposing upon a developer to put a 5-bedroom unit back into whatever is built?
I feel weird, Joe, you and I being on the opposite ends of this conversation. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't see the need for a cap though, because I think 5
That's
is
fine.
now,
I'm just,
well, only because 5 is now what, like the standard across the state for a 1-acre plot.
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
5 units per acre, yeah.
because only that's going to be the standard. I'm happy to like put a cap on, like consider something more than that, but only because that's now like the minimum.
Wait,
What?
I think Joe's talking bedrooms and you're talking units.
Yep, never mind.
yeah, I'm talking bedrooms in one unit.
Yep, never mind,
So
Joe.
say you had a 5-bedroom single-family house that was raised to put a multifamily, because I'm thinking of instances here, like I think, what was it, 39, or I don't remember the number of LeClaire Street, that was like a 4 or 5-bedroom house that was demolished. And they might not have been kind of standard bedroom sizes, but just looking at this from the side of a developer, I guess.
And what are they putting up, Joe?
I don't know that there's any proposal yet, but just thinking about what that would look like. And I think this also dovetails a little bit with the hotel proposal of some of the structures that are involved there, and how that would work with in lieu.
Yeah, I think, so it's by unit, right? So if these are multifamily, which I believe, like the structures that where the hotel's going in, it would be by unit. So if there's like 4 2-bedroom units, like it's a 8-bedroom house, but it's 4 2-bedroom units, that's what would have to be replaced. But yeah, the idea was to preserve family size housing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure
Right,
having
understood.
a cap on the bedrooms makes sense. I think we would want to either preserve
Yeah.
that larger home for families or have somebody who's developing it
Yeah.
replace it in their
Okay.
development.
That's fine, I'm just throwing out
Yeah.
the scenario there,
No,
because
it's a
they're,
good,
you know.
it's a good
Yeah.
question, yeah.
Say you had like a very large, old, single-family house.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you, Joe. Like, let's say you had a 7-bedroom house that someone wanted to convert into 1 4-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom. They're like two units of that size. Maybe that wouldn't
Right.
be such a bad thing, but I don't think there are that many.
Yeah, they're
Haven't
yeah,
already been
yeah, there are
converted.
that many. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But maybe I don't know what the formula would be. I think I wouldn't want it to be lower than, I think if there are very few 5-bedroom houses left in the city, and I don't think we'd want to lose them. I think if it's bigger than that, maybe we could think about it.
Yeah,
you
like, if it's
know,
over like 10, like we could talk about it. But
but even then, it's like, okay, let's say you have 6. I wouldn't want it to be 3 2s, right? I would want it to be like 3 and 3 or something, you know, or more. So it's a good thought. I think the devil is in the details, as always.
Yeah.
and thank you all for your patience with my unit versus
That's okay.
bedroom thing. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the payment in lieu conversation is probably better for the September joint housing committee planning commission meeting. I know that that's something that's to be discussed at that time. The only number I found in my digging was for Burlington for the inclusionary units, the payment in lieu is 35,000.
25,000 you said?
35,000 per unit.
Per unit.
But I think if we're gonna do market rate, then I think there's gonna need to be some more complex math. And I think that's where I was getting lost in the weeds with. So.
All right, let's.
Also, I'm just going to observe a trend here, and I don't know how our work on inclusionary zoning affects this, but I am seeing in the city a number of structures being demolished without proposal of what is to replace them. And I don't know if that's to skirt this because they know that we're working on this, but like homes that are being lost and buildings being demolished, so that they'll have a clear lot. And so what's going to happen here is that, like, you know, we didn't have this in place, and so I tore down, you know, 4 3-bedroom units or whatever, but this wasn't in place, and it's okay.
Right, I think that once this is in place, that will no longer be allowed.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but however, does this work in effect that, like, if the proposed development is on, like, oh, I just demolished, you know, a 3-bedroom house, you still have to put that back?
So, in most of the cases that you point to, Joe, those are lost due to fire. So that's why those buildings are going down in most of the cases. But either way,
that is not what I'm referencing.
Okay.
For instance, like the Digest parcel that's on corner of East Street and East Allen, where there's no actual proposal of what is going to replace it, but housing units were lost.
There was.
Is that Barlow in East Allen?
No.
No.
It's just past, wait, East Street?
Okay.
It's a corner of East Street and East Allen.
East Street.
Yeah, but either way,
Is East Street where-
if these regulations were to come into effect, any applicant would be subject to these regulations, and any replacement units that would be built would be subject to these regulations. So, but I think you bring up a good point that there would need to be some sort of,
It
I
was.
guess, like
And then-
time bracket, right?
Right. That's kind of what I'm looking at here, is that, because, I mean, it is conceivable, you cleared that parcel for redevelopment, and those units were lost. I'm not talking about fire or those extending circumstances.
Right. Okay. So like within 18 months of removal of the unit, the replacement unit has to be up or something like that.
Make something like that, or whatever you think would be a good time frame.
Okay.
You could just keep empty lots, right?
Yeah, well, which I'm kind of seeing.
Yeah. There's a parking lot there that's probably not zoned for that.
Right.
You said retroactively this could go into place?
I think what Joe is hitting on is that somebody could apply for a permit to remove the building and then later on have a redevelopment proposal without having to face the requirement to replace that unit.
Yeah.
And so in order to force that requirement, some sort of like time bookend would need to be put in, so that way that within 18 months of removing that unit or whatever X amount of time, one would be required to put in the replacement unit.
Yeah, good point,
Yeah.
Joe. That's important.
Because I'm also, I don't know if there's been a redevelopment plan, but I'm also looking at like 70 Barlow Street.
Yeah.
Is there anything set forth is like is inclusionary zoning going to apply there? Like what was lost is going to have to be incorporated?
So we can't make this retroactive.
No,
No.
it can only be applied forward.
Okay.
Right.
So we should move quickly if we can.
Yeah, it seems like it. Just the rate of things going down.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like we will discuss this in more detail. There's some improvements that the commission suggested that can go into this, like the time frame. But we'll discuss in more detail with our joint meeting with the Housing Commission about the fee in lieu and how that could work.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good. Thank you.
I do think the time frame is important because that could be a major way of skirting this.
Totally.
Because if a developer claims like, oh no, it's a vacant lot, there was nothing there. Well, actually there was.
Well,
So
there's two. I think there's two really somewhat different issues. You're talking about, Joe, like, so for example, on LeClaire Street near me, there was a house that was knocked down not that long ago. That lot is now empty. So that had however many bedrooms, that house.
right.
Let's say it had 5. So what you're saying is there a way to make this now apply to that lot when this goes into effect, right? So now when you're proposing this new development, you need to replace what was there before, even though this was not in effect when it was knocked down. It is in effect when you're applying for the new development. So that I'll leave it to Revy, the city attorney, to decide whether we can do that.
I'm just seeing there's kind of a missing link here.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have, if you're doing demolition not tied to a redevelopment plan, it seems like you can totally skirt this.
Yeah.
So there's that as to places that have already been knocked down. But then what Revy was talking about, which I think we definitely can do and we should do, is okay, we get this in effect for anything that hasn't been knocked down yet. How long do you have to replace it? And so it could be 18 months, 2 years, something like that feels reasonable to me.
I think that's the only way that we could utilize this. I don't think we'd be able to look back and say that since somebody knocked this down before these regulations were in place, that they would be required to put in those units that were lost, because the applicant did not know at the time that these were the development regulations. And so there's a certain amount of vesting that happens because they were subject to regulations before these were adopted when they took down the units. And a certain amount of faith was put in with those regulations at that time. So I don't think that it can work both ways, where anything that's lost right now, like the units on Barlow Street or 111 East Allen, like those units are unfortunately lost. There's no way to replace those units. But I think going forward, if we were to adopt these regulations, say hypothetically by the end of the year, then units that could be lost at the beginning of next year could then be replaced in a timely fashion.
Right. I understand going forward. Just to kind of flesh this out a little bit though, why can't you say that? Like, oh, we had on the tax rolls here that this was a 3-bedroom house. Like, that needs to be brought back. Like, I guess, I know there's legality issues there, but like, it was of record in the tax rolls. I mean, it's not as though it never existed. And whether it was destroyed by fire or external causes.
I think the issue is ultimately the case law would say it's a constitutional due process thing, that right or wrong. There's this idea that was the law that was in place when you knocked it down, and now you're sort of effectively saying you have this lot that was empty and now you must build
Yep.
essentially something of a certain type. And
Okay.
so that, rightly or wrongly, that's kind of how the law has developed over a long time.
Okay. Well, and just to my point, I'm sorry to belabor this. There are three very distinct instances of this going on in the city, and it's being noticed. So, like, it really is something we have to write into this.
Yeah, so I think the lesson is we should try and pass this sooner rather than
Yeah.
later, because that's what we can
That's what we can do.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying those nuances between the two timelines and what we can do. Ravi. Any other comments or discussion?
I guess the only thing, and again, I missed the bulk of this conversation, so I apologize. My only question is, I'm sorry guys, like this is more of a meta reflection, but like when we do talk about, for example, East Allen was brought up, like East Allen and East, yeah. If we talk about hypotheticals so much, but we don't talk about like the realities of basically materials, labor, and interest rates. Not that I think we should. I don't think that our policies should reflect national whims or whatever. However, it does make a pretty material impact on like what gets constructed. And so I'm fine with some type of like time horizon or window, but I just want to name it for the record that like I'm wary if like something happens within 8 months, like interest rates go up 3%, which is not unheard of, and then they can't do it. Like, do they come back with a new proposal? Do they just scrap the proposal altogether? Which is what I know has already happened on the East Allen property. It was proposed for a much larger development. So I'm not, fanning the flames of like developer complaints here. I'm just being wary of like the reality of if we want to incentivize new housing, what could be the barriers also?
Well, but this is just replacement housing. I see what you're saying. Like, I definitely see what you're saying, and like, I would be open to, okay, like,
I would say 5 years.
yeah. Well,
Is that too big?
I think that's too long. I think.
But that's the interest rate cycle for the
But
FRB.
So I mean, I think I could be persuaded, like, you've got 2 years, and then if you could apply for another year if there's some issue or something like that. I think to the extent that
All right, I'm
this
good with that.
gives, because what you can do is leave the units up and fix them instead. And so to the extent that this gives people pause about knocking down,
Thank you.
especially larger units that exist, that's what we're trying to do, I think. So
That's what I needed to hear,
Yeah.
and I'm so thankful we have a lawyer on this commission.
No, but that makes a lot of sense.
It does make
Think
a lot
of
of
it.
sense. No, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Extend it, but yeah, keep it up there.
It also raises a question for me if we have a time horizon, whatever we end up with, like for the replacement, if they don't meet that time horizon,
Good point.
what do we need to write into like as enforcement or consequence, or like how do you deal with somebody not fulfilling the time horizon?
But wouldn't you not get a certificate of occupancy if this is, I don't know, like for the rest of your project if you didn't follow through on this?
Yeah, but I agree with that. I
think-
agree with that.
Yeah, I think that you could, if they don't follow through and actually doing the replacement units and build something else out, yeah, I think that's reasonable. But what if they just don't build anything? Is it like, again, money to the trust fund? Like what are the levers to hold them accountable
Yeah, that's a
to the timeline?
Good point, Abby.
good point. Yeah,
Yeah, look at Newport, Vermont, right?
Right.
good point. Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I always say that Newport should have learned something from Winooski, but
Now we can learn something from Newport.
right.
Exactly. Thank you, Sarah. As a kid from the Northeast Kingdom, I appreciate that, Joe and Sarah. I wouldn't take too many tips from them, but
Okay, Ravi, how are you feeling?
Good, I have my work cut out for me.
You do.
Yeah.
are we giving you a budget
Welcome
to
to
do? Yeah.
Winooski.
Yep.
Yeah.
We like to give assignments.
We make our planners work hard. Okay. Anything else on this document, section 5.16?
Not for me.
Okay. I was gonna jump back to approving the last meeting minutes, but Brendan's gone, so let's move forward with item 6, discussion of H687 related amendments, the ULUDR section 5.10 and article 8.
Okay. So these are some really minor amendments to the regulations. Most of the changes with Act 687 were related to Act 250 and to the roles and responsibilities of regional planning commissions. There were some minor things that we'd have to do to make sure that our regulations are in alignment with statute. So one is in Article 8, this very minor change of removing the A next to section 4464 because the requirements are actually a lot more expansive on time limits for forwarding complete applications of the DRB. So in order to capture that, removing the A probably does it. And then secondly, adding hotel and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments under protected uses. Those are now considered protected uses. So there's not a whole lot that we can do in terms of our review. But it'd be very similar to how public facilities, schools, churches, and all those other uses on that list are reviewed for zoning permits.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the only thing you have changed in this section would just be in line with the new statute, right? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't need to. All right.
Pretty straightforward. Does anyone have any questions about either of those changes?
Nope.
Okay.
This is totally random, but just, I have a question. So I assume this comes from statute. What defines a parish house?
Joe, you know when you see it.
Is that the house next to the church?
Don't say that.
Well, I just asked that because that could,
I would expect you to know that, Joe. I don't know that.
well, no, because like that could be broadly interpreted as like, oh, is it like the dwelling house in which the pastor resides in, or is it like the church hall, or is like what are we talking about? But anyhow, it's neither here nor there.
That must be
I would just
must be
wonder-
language important from the South. I assume.
Okay.
Not derogatory. I'm just saying, like, right?
All right.
I assume
Right.
that it's
There's
the
no
house
there's
on
no
the-
parish above the Mason-Dixon line.
Well, I'm just thinking again, circling back to like the St. Stephen's property, like a lot of the discussion was surrounding the future of what happened to the actual church structure, not the rectory.
Right.
So like from this, it says, well, actually that could be a protected structure too.
Yeah.
But sorry to distract you all.
Yeah, it is a good question, and I guess the right word would be rectory. But that's what came to mind when you said parish house. I assumed it's where the priest or the person running the religious institution lived, but no. Okay.
Yeah, I think that could be interpreted a few different ways, but go on.
If it's relevant and important to find out, I bet we could ask Revi to help us with that.
I wouldn't put that on his shoulders, but it's just kind of a rhetorical question here about like when things do get included, like what do we actually mean by that?
Yeah.
Honestly, with some of these uses, I've gone down some weird rabbit holes and found no answers to them. Like state and community operated institutions and facilities is a whole other wormhole that leads to nothing.
Okay.
Well,
No,
and a
don't.
lot of these they're like legacy terms, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so
It's
Yeah.
the whole sentence is dated if you think about it.
yeah, but they're still
But-
on the books and
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
going to come off. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. And I guess I'm mentioning it because it seems like there was an instance where this was relevant not that long ago. So
Yeah, yep. Okay,
So at this point,
would you like us to formally approve those changes?
I'm trying to figure out whether you'd want to do this now or to bundle it with other changes. Because it doesn't really, it doesn't matter. I'm still subject to statutes, even though it's not in our regulations. It's
Mhm.
more of like a formality to inform applicants that this is all in alignment with statute. So you can move forward with them and warn a public hearing on this if you'd like, or you can just wait and bundle it with all the other changes that you're working on and just pass that over to council to approve all together.
I say bundling is probably okay.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable since it's so minor changes and it doesn't affect what they can actually do. People can actually, the law's the law.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like to have a hearing and go through that process for such.
Yeah. As long as you don't feel like you need it here to do what you need to do, then let's bundle it.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Thanks, Ruby. Okay, we will move on to, John never made it, right? Okay, we'll move on to discussion 7, introduction to transportation demand management options.
Okay. So for this, this is something that I'm like really interested in, and I noticed in our regulations that there's not too much talked about with this, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about this more and just get a better sense for me what Winooski sees for transportation options and what it looks for in requirements for development. So in the memo that I provided for you, I provided an overview of what our TDM section is, that it's an optional TDM section that a developer could opt to employ TDM strategies for a 15% parking reduction, which is pretty unique compared to most other municipalities. A lot of other municipalities, either in Vermont, most of them just don't have it, or would have something similar with some sort of a few options for TDM with some sort of parking reduction. But in our case, I think that we could do something a bit more, just because we have bus lines. Winooski is so small. It can be bikeable. It is pretty bikeable. Most streets are slow streets. So there could be more to be done with this. So I thought, why not talk about this more? I think there are multiple different ways that we could go about this, really. Mainly wanted to present to you what TDM was, what are the options out there, and what do we want to either require or to incentivize in future developments. So I think with this, I think we can sort of pick and choose, right? We can look through the options, we can add them into our current regulations and incentivize it. We can change the incentives a bit here and there to take away parking or to sort of reduce parking based on the amount of TDM strategies employed. We could also require it too, where it's required for all new developments. And even with that, there are multiple different options with that, whether we want to require it across the city or along our corridors. And many cities have many different ways of requiring TDM from new developments. And I guess I haven't really thought too much about how you want to discuss this, but Abby, if you have any ideas on how you want to structure this discussion, that would really help. Yes, Connor.
Nope, I was going to point to Abby as she's the TDM expert here.
Okay.
This looks fine to me, but I want to hear her input.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Ravi, who also has a great background in transportation. I'm intrigued of the idea of having it as a requirement, especially for like a certain number of units to kind of capture the bigger developments and have them think about alternatives to driving and supporting that within the city. So that's something I'm personally interested in exploring, but yeah, I'm also interested in hearing from fellow commissioners about some of the suggestions Ravi has put forth.
As always, I think we can be more aggressive, but that's just me.
I have a question. I don't need, don't shoot me for this one. I'm not a cyclist, I'm not a biker, so is there any way, I mean, we live in Vermont and the winters are pretty rough, and I don't know if a lot of people continue to bike all through the winter. Is there any way to build in a little exchange in parking? So in other words, could you put some parking that in half the year is bike parking and the winter months it becomes automobile parking?
I feel like maybe that's a good question, Sarah, and I do want to make sure we answer it, but just to back up for one step to make sure everybody's like fully clear on what TDM is. Transportation demand management is trying to reduce the amount of single occupancy vehicles on the road. So it could be carpooling, it could be busing, it could be walking, it could be biking, it could be van pooling, it could be park and rides. It's like a whole suite of options. So it's definitely not just biking. That being said, I'm trying to think how you would you could put removable racks in parking spaces and then maybe store them in the winter to be able to use convert parking spaces during warmer weather where there's definitely more people that are biking in warmer. We have year-round cyclists, but there are definitely more people biking in the warmer weather. Is that something you've seen explored in other communities?
Not like that. No, not for taking out parking. I mean, on a seasonal basis. I mean, I've seen that in on a permanent basis, like adding in a bike corral instead of a parking space, or putting in bike parking just for the summer months. That's what Church Street does. Their bike parking is only available in the summer months.
Is that true on all of Church Street?
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
That's right.
Huh.
Yeah, because it's a pain to plow through it.
Yeah,
So they
snow
take 'em-
plowing is always.
Yeah, so they take them out every winter.
I think we do that with some of our racks in the city too. I
Okay.
think.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Good downtown.
So
Yeah. In the core.
yeah, and I think for private developments on site, that can get a little tricky with like for residential properties, if there's a deeded parking space, if parking spaces are attached to certain units, parking spaces are required for certain units. I haven't seen a model for this, and I think there's a way to do it. I just haven't seen that model yet, and I haven't seen it like thought out yet.
I guess then the other thing I'm thinking about, like if you have a car and a bike, and you're biking most of the fair weather months and you're driving the rest of the year, you still have to park your car somewhere. So if that spot is converted to bike parking.
Well, I think about the on-street winter parking bans.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, maybe we don't necessarily need to go down this road. It's just popped into my head.
No,
Maybe there's
yeah.
more to talk about. I mean,
It's not a bad thought, Sarah.
Yeah.
No, it's not a bad thought. My first thought was actually, can we reverse it? Almost, because like how many spaces are not used in the main parking garage?
right.
Can we
Good thing.
convert in
reverse
the
it?
summer months like
Yeah.
a certain portion of like the bottom floor, sorry VSAC, to like put in a bunch of like removable bike racks,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
in the winter remove them so people can park there. It's never gonna be full, but
Yeah. That's a good point. I didn't think about the parking ban. That would definitely drive people
Yeah.
on site
yeah.
to park on site. Yeah.
Granted, I don't have a car, so
The whole city parking garage is kind of a can of worms, isn't it though, about like
yes.
over leased spots versus like, so there's available spots, but they're not necessarily available because they're allocated and promised to something else. And
Yeah.
Not anymore, I don't think. I
did they
mean,
resolve that?
well, I mean, the last time I checked, they, like, it was like, what, 24%
Yeah,
reserved?
it's fully leased.
Christine would know.
Right,
There's
that-
couple spaces in there. It's fully leased. The overleasing thing was resolved, but it's fully leased. When we get the second garage built, we're actually moving, CCV's lease over to that one. And so that will open some more spaces in the existing garage.
Yeah.
I will say though, it doesn't see a lot of public use, one, because people prefer on street, and two, I think realistically right now, people have safety concerns in there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Safety concerns.
We'll see.
I've never had trouble finding parking in there. I thought that was an ongoing, I didn't know that had been resolved, the thing with like what was reserved and what wasn't.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I think the biggest problem is that people don't know it's there.
Right. That's,
Yep.
yeah.
That's
It's
right.
an interesting idea of adding capacity, bike parking capacity in the parking garage. Like I know, just because we have tons of students in Spinner Place, they don't have indoor bike parking
Ooh, that's a good
for
point.
those students, but they're too nervous about parking it out like by the
Yeah.
bus stop.
Yeah,
There was like a cage,
Yeah.
cage like bike structure
like the lower, the lower lot, like
in the lower
3
lot.
slots, like it's not gonna disrupt a ton of stuff. Sorry, are we getting too into
It's-
this, Ribby?
No,
Yeah.
this is.
See, now we're dreaming, and like I just
Yeah,
wanna make sure
well,
It's
we
a
pull
very
out a
fascinating
little bit.
sidebar, so I'm interested.
Yeah, no, and it's talking about like a actual specific tangible resource that we
Mhm.
have and I think is underutilized.
Mhm.
So
Agree.
I guess my thought about this is if we were to pursue this idea of basically for all the year or part of the year turning like the bottom floor of the garage into bike parking, I do think we'd want it to be enclosed like a cage. Unfortunately,
Lockable, yeah.
the safety concerns that the mayor alluded to and that Connor alluded to, I don't think a bike is any less likely to be stolen. It's probably more likely to be stolen if it's just in a rack on like an exposed rack in the garage than on the street. So we just have to, if we ever go down this route, we'd have to think about that.
Yeah, sorry, again, real into the weeds here. Mayor, do you know who owns the GMT rest stop like there that's been closed for the last couple of years? Is that us or is that GMT?
I don't think it's the city. I think it's the building owner technically.
Oh,
I'm unclear because oftentimes GMT will maintain even if they're not the owner, so I'm not sure what
Yeah.
the relationship is there.
all right, that's true. I was just thinking like it's climate controlled, it's lockable, security's like systems already in place. Just remove the.
Yeah, I didn't realize you can access that.
No, you can't. No,
Not for a
I
while.
haven't been for 3-4 years. Mayor,
There was a
Right.
lot of illicit behavior and bad things happening, so it's close to the public.
Mayor, I'm sorry. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There was a lot of illicit and bad behavior happening in there, and it ended up just becoming closed to the public. And GMT has also said that they have a lot of trouble maintaining their existing like shelters and spaces.
Yeah, and that's why they won't build new ones.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Yes. I'm just saying, like it's unavailable. I don't know. who
But in
owns it.
relationship to,
we don't need to solve this problem right now. I was just.
It's not a
I
bad
was
thought
yapping.
as well, yeah.
It's a what? Jen?
well, I wanted to share in relationship to this discussion and GMT not wanting to build bus shelters. It may be more viable to have an actual development build one, and then there's property management on site and more incentive for maintenance.
I mean, I don't speak on behalf of GMT, but I think that they would be more than happy to, pay for like capital costs of like removing the seats and like cleaning if we just convert it to a bike storage place and then it's the city's responsibility. But that is taking on new responsibility for like code and police.
Mayor Lot, were you talking about like adding new bus shelters at existing stops that don't have shelters if the development's nearby?
Like within TDM, if there's an incentive for developers to take care of that instead of trying to rely on GMT.
Yeah, agreed.
Which are, I think, already in our incentives, right?
We do,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, maybe it's helpful if you pull up your suggested framework, we could sort of talk through how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, let's
Maybe?
get back on track here.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
So at the,
I know who I am.
what's it called? In your memo, yeah. Second page of your memo, you have suggested frameworks based on some research that you've done.
Yeah.
You want to walk us through that?
Sure. So, like I said before, a lot of municipalities require that new projects include TDM strategies as part of their project, whether that's building a new shelter, maintaining the shelter, providing discounted bus passes, providing membership or discounts to car share, including a car share space on the property, including mixed-use development. So with those options would be, including those options would be required based off of how large the development is. So I'm thinking of requiring that for projects that are greater than 20 units or commercial developments that are greater than 7,500 square feet. And that is then scaled based on how large the project is. So a smaller project would require maybe 3 or 4 strategies to be incorporated in the project, compared to a larger project that would need 5 to 8 strategies. The point values that I have on the spreadsheet depend on how expensive that strategy is and the impact of that strategy at reducing single vehicle use and vehicle miles traveled. So I think with this idea, with this framework, that gives you, I guess, multiple directions to think about with what we want, expect from developers, and what we'd like from developers in the city.
How do other people feel about this threshold of 20 units, having requirements sort of kick in at the 20 unit level, or having developers invest in TDM for the city?
In your experience, is that high? For
I,
units at least? For tier 1?
I feel like that would, I mean, it sounds like it's best practice, but I feel like it's very reasonable. So everybody under 20 units would be like, not have requirements, they'd just be incentivized to do TDM.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So they would get that parking reduction, and then the requirements would kick in at 20, but 20 to 40 would be a certain, you could see he has like 3 to 4 strategies.
Yeah.
41 to 80 would be the 4 to 6, and the huge ones would have the 5 to 8. And we would have to flesh out what those strategies were and how many points they were assigned, but the idea is to sort of, as the development gets bigger, the transportation impact in the community gets bigger.
Right.
And with the parking, all of the incentives that we have for parking reductions and the desirable, like the desire to be a walkable and bikeable city, having the developer help us with that instead of the burden being on the backs of the taxpayers to get the infrastructure in place to support walking,
Exactly.
biking, busing, car share, bike share, all of the alternatives.
Yeah, I'm fine with this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Remy, but I think what the city has seen in the last 5-10 years, we haven't seen a lot of, say, like 10 unit projects, right? Like it's kind of, you might have small scale, like 2 or 3 or something, or it's big, right? Like
That's the Vermont pattern of development.
Yeah.
It's either 9 units or 30. There's nothing in
Right.
between.
right,
Yeah.
Pretty Winooski. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So
All right.
I think it makes sense then.
Any idea how many more large units are gonna fit in the gateways or the downtown? I mean,
Right? We have,
does this get us?
prospectively, two, the one that's proposed for East Allen and East,
Yeah,
and then I assume whatever is gonna go in on East Allen. Oh, and Main Street, I suppose.
Yeah.
yeah, Main
Yeah, that's a
Street.
good point.
It's not-
All right,
it's
I'm
big.
pulling
Yeah,
back.
now-
I think there's a lot of development.
There's a
potential.
lot of development potential in the city depending on how you do it, and you can do it pretty innovatively. Especially considering that in C1 in the central business district, the height limit is 60 feet, and you can do 100% lot coverage. Along the gateways, the height limit can be 4 to 5 stories. And then plus if it's affordable housing, then you get that bonus story. It's just a matter of how you fit in the parking and how you balance out the parking with the parking reductions. But if you're able to be innovative and figure out a good building footprint, and you're able to build up with a good amount of parking, and then also manage the stormwater, sky's the limit.
Yeah, do you remember the property they proposed for across the street from Beverage Warehouse?
Yeah.
It was like a huge one.
Yeah.
And then the one going up by the school, I believe, has quite a lot of units going in or proposed to go in on that
Yeah, that one is, I
place
want to say
Right next to the-
75.
one. 75 units right next to the school.
Mhm.
That abandoned house that's just been sitting there vacant.
Whoa, 75?
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah,
And then
Goes
one
way
is-
back.
Wait, where's the park? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's a long lot, so there's like a parking in the back of the lot. And the 30 Main Street, how many are going in on that one?
so that one was proposed at also somewhere similar, like 70, just
Yeah,
check. But
It's
yeah.
quite large. Not big units, small units.
Yeah,
but-
so, I mean, those are larger properties, keep that in mind. Those are some of the largest
was
properties
multi-unit.
along that Main Street corridor. But even on the smaller
bedrooms.
properties,
The, 30.
if you're able to manage
There's some two bedrooms.
building 4 to 5 floors, the parking and stormwater, you could fit in a lot of units.
So, Revi, as far as fleshing out the points and the strategies, is that the next step to kind of understand what this would look like?
Yeah, so I was hoping to frame this conversation so that way we could talk about the direction that you want to go, whether you want to incentivize requiring transportation demand management strategies into new developments, or whether you wanted to require it, and then also look at the possible strategies in that spreadsheet to see what are all the options there are. I surveyed options from different cities just to give you a range of what all possibilities there are, and then looking at those, I whittled it down to what's applicable to the Winooski context. So I figured we could start there to see what do we want from developers, and what can we ask from developers, and then from there, the next conversation would be about the actual ordinance text and what that framework looks like. I think in this memo, I just have a basic outline of what that framework could be, where based on the scale of development, then we can require 3 to 4 strategies, or 4 to 6 strategies, or 5 to 8 strategies, depending on the impact of the strategies, the type of strategies. And then the next step would be how we want to piece that together in the text of the ordinance.
But I assume that we could, so you've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I mean, we could create it so that those are actually slightly different. Maybe the larger ones have slightly more requirement. We build some more requirements in, and the lesser ones are more incentivized. I mean, maybe you could.
That's exactly how I framed it. So the tier 1 projects would be required to have 3 or 4 strategies, versus the tier 3 projects that are much larger would be required to have 5 to 8 strategies.
But, so they'd be required to have the strategies as opposed to incentivizing.
That's up for discussion, Sarah.
Okay.
How are you
What
thinking
I'm-
about it?
Well, I'm just saying, could there be say on the very large ones, there's less incentive and more requirement. Could you make each tier slightly different? Is that,
Yeah, so right now what he's proposed is the smaller, well, under 20 is no requirement, right?
Yeah,
They would
right.
just be incentivized.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
20 to 40, you have to do a few, and then the bigger it gets, the more you have to do. So the smaller the development, the less is required. And I think the discussion is like, do we have requirements, and how do those requirements look or incentives look in each of the different sizes? Like, does it make sense to just have incentives and then it kicks in at the 20 to 40? And then if we start requirements at the 20, 40, how much are we requiring? Do we want to incentivize above whatever we're requiring? Like, that's all up for discussion.
I mean, can we, I know it's hard to, it's a little bit abstract right now too, but so can you say, all right, if we get an 80+ unit building going up, what would we like it to end up with in terms of the incentives? Or like, is there benefits to another level? So it's more pointed what we want to end up with. You see what I mean? As opposed to letting the a la carte.
Oh, like actually designing exactly what TDM strategies we want them, that we want to be required versus a menu.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a question or not. I mean, is that a way that we should be thinking about this, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that does transition the conversation from incentives to mandates, which I'm
Yeah.
not opposed to.
Well, it's more specific mandates, because right now it's mandating however many strategies. What Sarah was
Over 20, yeah.
postulating is not just you must have 8 strategies, you must have these 8 strategies or these 4 strategies or something. So
Alright.
Yeah,
Thank you for-
yeah.
I think those would have to be like context specific. I think
Right.
there would have to be some
Yes.
sort of nexus to it. So maybe
Yeah.
we could require improvements to bus stops if the project is located off of a bus line.
Yeah, I
Or
guess.
something a bit more directly connected to the exact strategy. But we'd have to be very, very context specific
Yeah.
and make sure that we have like some sort of map that connects the strategy with the project and the
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm sort of kicking around is that, so you don't end up with incentives that don't actually get us to a better level because the other ones somehow are easier to use, you know, or put into your development.
Yeah, I think that's where the assigning of the points to the strategies comes in play.
Yeah.
And if you can maybe draft what that could look like, we can sort of visualize if this is enacted, what it actually means on the ground.
Sure. So you want me to show you the spreadsheets?
You know
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
Yay, spreadsheets. Okay. So looking at these strategies, so these are all the potential options for strategies that I've laid out as possibilities for Winooski. So in this framework, I've set it up so there are required strategies and elected strategies. Required strategies that we want people to know about the options that they have to get from point to point, and we want there to be more than the minimum bike parking at any locations so that people can, residents, employees can safely stow their bikes. And then on top of that, the developer can choose an array of possibilities and strategies that they can include in their development. So like discounted car share membership, bike repair stations, additional accessory uses, discounted transit pass, wayfinding signage, car share vehicle on-site, e-bike and e-scooter charging, TMA membership, so like membership with CATMA in essence. And this too, I've separated it out so there are potential options for all projects, potential options for just residential projects,
Yeah.
and potential options for just commercial projects. And so say with that 80 unit hypothetical development that would be required to have, I think, 8 points. They could choose, of course, the required strategy of 1 point, and then make up the remaining 7 points with through the menu of options, and choose 3 to 4 strategies from this menu to meet that requirement.
I'm fine with all of these. These seem to be like very comprehensive, and like thank you for putting this together. Especially this is super helpful to like, just see right now. Have in the other municipalities that you've like reviewed to put this together, have you seen any instance of like how these have become barriers at all to development?
I haven't.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I haven't, just because, yeah, yeah.
That was not a gotcha moment.
Yeah.
I was genuinely curious, and
Yeah.
that's a fair answer too.
Yeah, in my last role in Burlington, I did some TDM work as they were working on their current TDM plan and their overhaul of their TDM ordinance. And in those conversations too, it was, they didn't really talk too much about any challenges or difficulties in implementing these strategies. Of course, these are small costs. These are costs on the developer, and some of these are smaller than others, some of these are larger than others.
But nothing from the developers.
From the consultants and from the developers, I haven't heard of any
That's good enough for me.
issues.
I mean, just, this is one thing, right? But a car share vehicle on site is worth 2 points. So like, is that a cost? Sure. But like in the context of like a big project, I don't know. I don't think it's huge necessarily. And frankly, I think to the extent that it adds cost, then yes, maybe that means that like rents need to be higher, but I think that there's such a shortage of housing that they're able to kind of charge what they need to, so I think if we should be mindful about it. But
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I come from my own personal experience, and also like several of my like a lot of people are now foregoing cars. Gen Z has what, 40%, 42% of no, not Gen Z. Gen Z doesn't have a license.
Well,
We're assuming that people have cars. They don't.
Yeah. But I think one other offset to consider too is that in many of these municipalities, and in Burlington too, in certain parts, parking isn't required. So I think that's some part of this offset too, is that like by reducing parking, that cost would go towards funding this, or a portion of that cost would go towards funding these TDM strategies. So I think for this to work to a certain extent, there would have to be some sort of parking reduction involved, with the idea that these strategies are going to reduce those trips that are going to be taken out of that development.
I always go back to like our subpar bike lane infrastructure and in a lot of cases sidewalk infrastructure. Is there any way to build that? I mean, maybe the TDM isn't the place to build that in, but in general, is there a way to build in some developers paying into the cost of like if their property abuts like a lack of a sidewalk?
That's a good point.
Or a sidewalk that's like in turmoil, to kind of help keep our public walk bike infrastructure intact or add it where it doesn't exist.
Is this now returning? Sorry to preempt you, but like, does this not return to impact fees?
So
It could.
So there's impact fees, and then there's also what Abby's talking about, using TDM to build out that infrastructure. And there's definitely, I think under all possible strategies, other cities have done this, where they've, if a project is in a location that requires some sort of streetscape improvement, then that streetscape improvement could be built out for a certain amount of points. I think from what I've seen, our plan isn't that precise, where we have like a required, bump out in a particular location, or required like stormwater, rain garden, like in the right of way of that location. So it's I think that can be built in. I think we need a bit more precision on our part to have that plan in place.
Yeah, okay. So I think the goal, Revi, if I'm restating what you said right, was sort of to introduce this idea, kind of talk through the concept of it, and then come back to it maybe at the next meeting?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, during the next meeting, I can come back with draft text, if you'd like.
Sure,
So you
yeah.
can see how that all works out on the developer and what they would be required to do, essentially.
How does that sound to the commission?
It's fine with me. I think you mentioned potentially parking reduction going along with it, so I think specific proposals about that should be part of the whole suite.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Giving you a lot of homework.
This is our usual MO, Revi.
No worries, I'm used to it.
Okay.
I know, he was in the city of Burlington. I
Oh,
mean,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Right,
I
yeah.
also have not been here for a few weeks, so I don't know what you've been subjected to. And we're going light today.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
only
we're going
two for
pretty
you.
light.
Get there. Like,
Any thoughts from folks online? Okay.
Do we have any members of the public?
Did any members of the public join us? We didn't in the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I don't think.
No,
I
No.
don't think they work yet.
no.
Okay. Well, I think the timing is good then to go ahead and move on to city updates. And we'll start with updates from the mayor.
Sure. Monday we had city council meeting. We approved a grant to, I should have my notes open, but a grant to do like a strategic plan for electric vehicle infrastructure to accompany the master plan. The purpose of which would be to figure out I think it's like 2030 and 2045, what capacity the city might need, and then draft a plan of how to work towards that, as well as shift some city fleet towards EVs. We also took a vote. So you may recall that we messed up with the timing with the just cause eviction charter change vote public hearings. And so we have to hold that vote again as a city. And well, so we do for compliance. However, there is already a bill in the legislature and it's still under consideration for the upcoming year. So we were voting on whether to put it on the November general election or next town meeting day, and landed on town meeting day to keep it aligned with local items and all resident voting. And then third, we adopted our final policy priorities and strategies for the upcoming year. Not a lot of changes from last year because so many things are ongoing. I think there's 3 new items. One is related to looking for ways to support businesses through Main Street construction. One is related to addressing challenges with, we have like a handful of residents that are kind of frequent flyers, high needs for public safety and community services. So we're trying to find a way to address that. And the third one escapes me at the moment. But we also had a conversation about commission engagement. You all have your work plan already. Nothing changed about what we'd like you all to focus on. So not a lot new coming out of that for this body. I think that's it for now.
can I make just one comment? I've been thinking about it, and now that just you're here, and I didn't attend that meeting. On there, where where the old commodity store was, and
Yeah.
a few things. I mean, those businesses are vacant most of the time, and I wondered if there would be any way the city could maybe make a deal with the owners of those properties to put some of the Main Street businesses down there, even if it's just on a temporary basis. You don't have to answer it. It's
an
Yeah.
idea I can pass along. Thanks, Deb.
I don't hate that. That's a great idea, Sarah.
Yeah. So there's 3. There's quite a lot of space there that's vacant again.
Well, Hannaford's isn't showing up anytime soon, so.
No.
Oh, I did have a conversation with one of the developers with vacant land about desire for grocery store in the community, and connected them with Melissa at downtown Winooski and the Grocers Association. So there was some interest. Obviously, it's about numbers for a developer. So if they can find someone that wants to operate one, we at least have some conversation going on that front.
Well, that's exciting.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Ruth, you're up next. Do you have any updates from the Inclusion and Belonging Commission you'd like to share?
No, we haven't met since our last meeting, I believe.
Okay, thanks for joining us. And the last update is from city staff. Revi, what do you got for us?
Yeah, Ravi, what do you have?
Just like Christine mentioned, the city council approved applying for an public EV charging planning grant. So we're going to look for potential locations for public EV chargers, look at how much demand is needed based on what we're looking to do per our master plan. So that way we know how much to build out in 2035 and in 2050, and to phase out that build out over the next few years or decades or however long it is. So that way we are more competitive for EV supply equipment grants and for installing EV chargers in the city. So I am ready to click submit on that application. I'm just like having a little bit of cold feet and making sure that I checked off all the boxes, but I'm ready to go. So. Two other things that I have on my list are for the next city council meeting, there's going to be a presentation on the LaFountain Street, Diamond Street scoping study.
Nice.
So that's something to keep on your calendars to attend. The next city council meeting is on September 3rd on a Tuesday, so the day after Labor Day. During that discussion too, something that's relevant to the Planning Commission is discussions about the certified local government certification through the State Historic Preservation Office through Vermont ACCD. So City Council is going to have a discussion on whether to apply for the certified local government designation and also all the requirements for that. So
You said certified government designation?
certified local government.
Local government.
Yeah.
Is that the Act 250 thing?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's related specifically to historic preservation.
Oh.
So municipalities that have met certain requirements for historic preservation, like having an active inventory of historic structures in the city or town, and having a design review and ordinances, can apply to be certified local government, and that it connects the municipality to resources with the State Historic Preservation Office, with additional grant funding opportunities for historic preservation, and additional resources for educating the public on historic resources in the city.
Sounds good. What does it ask for in return?
Nothing.
Okay.
So we've already done all the Eric, you, the city, and the local Resources Advisory Board (LRE) have already done most of the hard work. At this point, it's just a matter of organizing all that material and putting it out, and so that way we are listed on ECC's website as a certified local government, and we get those benefits.
Great.
Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay. All right, under other business, we have the City of Burlington Comprehensive Development Ordinance Amendments. Did we need to review that packet you included?
If you want, it's required by statute to notify adjacent municipalities of any changes, any pending changes to zoning ordinances. So City of Burlington is doing a bunch of changes as part of their missing middle project. So a lot of this is technical changes to part 1 of the neighborhood code and some changes to impact fees, waivers. Yeah, so, but the main thing is, I think, technical changes related to neighborhood code when they passed that a couple of months ago, a few months ago.
Did I hear that correctly? Missing middle?
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, that's a new term to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
First I've heard it.
Yeah, missing middle is everything in between the McMansion or the single-family dwelling
Yeah.
and affordable housing. So it's not. It's like it's
Big A affordable.
Hmm?
Big A affordable.
Big A affordable, right? It's for the this middle class, middle diversity, middle everything housing.
Okay.
So-
Well, that's the first I've heard of this, and I didn't know if that referred to where the mall was and like the downtown redevelopment, or what you just elaborated on.
Mhm. Yep.
When you
Thank
say
you.
it's like the missing middle for Chittenden County.
Yep. Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah.
That's a good characterization.
Great. Any questions about that or any other business?
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
In regard, I've been absent at a number of the most recent meetings. I don't know if I caught this in some of the earlier discussion, but I think it was called the Wagoner Project, was on East Allen Street, south of CCV. Is that still on track?
That is an
They're
excellent.
on hold.
Hmm?
They're on hold because of
Oh, they are.
things Connor was describing earlier. Financial pressures have been there.
Okay. Because that was major, and I was just kind of curious because I think Connor alluded to a project being stalled on East Allen.
Okay. Great. So it's 8 o'clock on the dot. Can we adjourn? Would anyone like to
Yeah.
make a motion?
Do you want to vote on minutes?
I looked back at the minutes and I don't think we even have, because I guess John had said that he was going to join us, but since he never came, we don't have the 3 people from even the last meeting. So, yeah, thanks. I was going to jump back, but I actually can't. So we'll just keep adding to our list of meeting minutes until we have more people show up.
I think so.
Okay, well then I'll make a move to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sarah and Joe. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. All right, that adjourns our meeting. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you, Abby.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to meet you, Robbie.
Bye.